Order. We start with questions to the Minister for the Cabinet Office.
Right, let me get going.
Jodie Gosling.
Question number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government takes very seriously our role in ensuring the resilience of government suppliers. The Cabinet Office takes an active role in monitoring government strategic suppliers and putting in place contingency plans where there is risk of distress. More broadly, the Cabinet Office works alongside other government departments, from the Department of Business and Trade and the Insolvency Service to Treasury. We are supported by UK Government Investments, which is the government's centre of excellence in corporate finance, with experience of corporate finance, restructuring or insolvency in the private sector. Of course, any taxpayer support must be used wisely, balancing the need to ensure value for money and to support jobs and the economy.
Jodie Gosling.
Thank you. Following the collapse of the Five Skin Group, a large employer in Nuneaton, we're aware that the health services that the company offered have been impacted. And as such, can the Minister please explain what steps they are taking to ensure that government departments have contingency plans to sustain the work that these companies were offering to private healthcare patients?
Minister.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for that question. I hope that she'll appreciate that I cannot comment on the specifics of the case that she mentioned, but of course when any business collapses it causes huge distress to the customers and the people that work there, and thinking about those impacted in her constituency. In general, independent providers of NHS services must hold an NHS provider licence unless exempt. Licensed providers who provide services that are hard to replace are subject to financial oversight and risk-based quality governance oversight to safeguard continuity of services for patients. If my honourable friend wishes to write to me with further details, I'll ensure that the relevant minister gets back to her.
Dyke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Almost 48,000 companies in the South West are now classed as being in significant economic distress, according to the latest Begbie's Trainers Red Flag report. This is visible in market towns in Glastonbury and Somerton, like Wincanton and Street, which are losing high street stores. So what steps is the Minister taking with her Cabinet colleagues to support businesses into the South West?
Thank my honourable friend for your question. This government is absolutely determined to support growth in this country. It's one of the driving missions of this government, and there is work going on across government to support economic growth, to support investment and to ensure that high streets are thriving again.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Question number 2, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Apologies. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to answer questions 2 and 14 together. We will end the waste, inefficiency and cronyism that set in under the previous government. With this government, procurement will deliver value for money, better public services and our national missions. As a first step, we're bringing forward a new national procurement policy statement under the Procurement Act that will deliver a mission-led procurement regime. It will drive value for money, economic growth and social value. We've also taken steps to cut down on wasteful consultancy spending and work to set up a new COVID counter-fraud commissioner. As set out in our plan to make work pay, we'll also take further reforms set out in our manifesto.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for mentioning cronyism in her answer. The biggest procurement scandal I have seen in my lifetime was under the last Conservative government, when ministers were giving out dodgy contracts to their mates and donors. They took our country's reputation for honesty and integrity and they trashed it. Residents in my constituency are not only angry, Mr. Speaker, they are disgusted and ashamed. Can the Minister update the House on what steps the Government has taken to ensure there will never again be a repeat of this episode? And where the public has been defrauded, will we get our money back for public services? Dramatic pause, Mr. Speaker. Apologies.
My honourable friend can see just how keen I am to take steps on this action. They're absolutely right that taxpayers are paying the price for the Conservative government allowing waste and fraud to spiral out of control. The Chancellor of the Exchequer recently took decisive action in appointing a new COVID counter-fraud commissioner to help us recover public money and ensure that this never happens again. I'm working closely with the Public Sector Fraud Authority to push every avenue on detecting fraud, from advanced AI and analytics through to strengthening our enforcement powers.
Jill Platt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister agree that when done right, public procurement can deliver positive change in our communities, especially given the poor state of public finances left by the previous government? Can the Minister outline what steps she will take to ensure that social value is properly embedded in our procurement frameworks while delivering value for taxpayers and contributing to growth in our local economies?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend that procurement can be a powerful tool for delivering change in our society. Public sector procurement can help drive our ambitions around growth and opening up opportunities to communities across the UK. This government is currently consulting on a new national policy procurement statement which will set out our expectations around mission delivery and social value.
James Shannon.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for her answer, very helpful. I want to perhaps maybe focus, if I can, upon SMEs. So what steps are being taken to ensure that SMEs in Northern Ireland and further afield in the United Kingdom have readily available access to the public procurement system to ensure that they can secure the best goods for their business and help our economy in Northern Ireland grow thereby? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for your question, and supporting SMEs through procurement is a huge priority for this government. It's one of the things we're consulting on as part of the new national policy procurement statement that I talked about, and looking across our work in government to ensure that SMEs are part of the process of procurement. So it's something we'll be coming back to this House on.
Number 3, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Royal Fleet Auxiliary staff do excellent work on behalf of the Royal Navy and for our national security, and for that work I pay tribute to them. I have been in contact with the Secretary of State for Defence on this issue. I'm hopeful that a resolution can be found on pay matters currently under discussion between Nautilus, the RMT and the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, and that the current dispute can be resolved.
Mike Gainsborough.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I welcome the efforts of the government and other government departments in trying to resolve this dispute, unlike the previous government that actually sat on their hands to ensure that we resolve this dispute in the not too distant future. I do urge ministers to double their efforts with colleagues in the MOD and the Treasury. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Government officials are in negotiation with the trade unions. We do want to see an end to the dispute that gets a fair pay offer to the workers involved, but also, of course, delivers value for money for the taxpayer, and that's what we'll try to achieve.
Clive James Jones.
Number 4, Mr Speaker. Thank you.
The Prime Minister and President von der Leyen have agreed to strengthen the relationship between the UK and the EU. Vice President Šefčovič, whom I met in Strasbourg on Tuesday, and I will be getting the reset moving this autumn. As part of this, the government will seek to negotiate an SPS agreement and remove other barriers to trade.
Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The British Poultry Council have recorded a 50% drop in poultry meat exports since 2020. Between 2019 and 2022, UK agri-food exports to the EU contracted by 5% and have struggled to recover to 2019 levels. Rural businesses are being held back from exporting to the EU due to costly border charges and administrative hurdles. And so has the Minister's Department assessed the impact on food prices if a veterinary and plant agreement with the EU is not reached before Christmas?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman's question exactly sets out why negotiating an SPS agreement is so important. The government has also set out that there will be a UK-EU summit in the first half of next year, and it's been made clear to me and indeed to Vice President Šefčovič that there should be progress by then.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I just start by offering the congratulations of the Liberal Democrat benches to our honourable friend, the member for Brecon, Radnor and Cwm Tower, and the safe arrival of his baby son yesterday, and offer our very best wishes to David, to Gemma and to all the family. Mr Speaker, I'm sure the Government can agree that support and providing opportunities for young people should be central to the policy of any government. We're glad to see the new government working to build closer economic and cultural ties with Europe. We want to forge a new partnership with our European neighbours built on cooperation, not confrontation, and move to a new comprehensive agreement. We must rebuild confidence through seeking to agree partnerships or associations helping to restore prosperity and opportunities for British people. So I ask the Minister if he will consider the extension of a youth mobility scheme and acknowledge the breadth of ways in which this would strengthen our cultural, educational and economic links with Europe.
Well, firstly, could I add our congratulations to the member for Brecon, Radnor and Cwm Tower on the safe arrival of his new baby. With regard to the specific point that the Honourable Lady makes, we're not going to give a running commentary on the negotiations. We will obviously look at EU proposals on a range of issues, but we are clear that we will not return to freedom of movement.
Can I just remind the front bench to do look at the chair now and again? It would help, because sometimes I can't hear what's being said. It does help me, and we are working in the third person, and I'm trying to get the House to work how it should be. That's great. Alan Gavin?
5, Mr Speaker.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to answer questions 5, 9 and 15 together. We were elected on a manifesto with 5 missions to rebuild Britain and turn the page on 14 years of decline under the party opposite. These 5 missions offer real and tangible benefits to people living in every part of our country: higher living standards, cleaner energy, safer streets, longer, healthier lives, and a renewed confidence that the future will be better for our children. I'm delighted to report to the House that we've already begun the change we set out in our national missions, making our economy stable, launching a new Border Security Command, setting up Great British Energy and setting out ambitious plans in housing.
The excellent Ayrshire Chamber of Commerce is helping Ayrshire businesses grow, and after 17 years of the SNP failing Scottish businesses in Ayrshire need this support as well as this government's 5 missions. Does the Minister agree with me that to deliver the change our country needs, we need a new way of doing politics, working in partnership with communities, business, civil society and trade unions?
I thank my honourable friend for that question and commend the work of the Ayrshire Chamber of Commerce and the businesses in his constituency. The Prime Minister has set a clear direction for missions to mobilise action beyond government, including across business, civil society and local government. Missions require wider sectorial and societal engagement and action across the UK. They're not simply tasks for one agency or sector. I'm pleased by the progress we're making in this area. I was delighted to see last week the launch of the Civil Society Covenant, which marked a new beginning of the government's relationship and made clear the pivotal role civil society has in delivering our missions.
Luke Charters.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. York and Piglet's Adventure Farm are just 2 examples of highly innovative businesses in my constituency. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that from lager to lambing, businesses will play a critical role in delivering the 5 missions, and therefore that business engagement is key?
I thank my honourable friend for that question and for highlighting the work that Brew York and Piglet's Adventure Farm does in his constituency. I absolutely agree with him that engagement and working with business will be key to delivering on all 5 of our missions.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I congratulate this government in trying to use the missions to stop the siloed working between government departments in order to achieve the change the country needs. I wanted to focus specifically on the housing mission and the importance of linking in Health, Treasury, Department of Transport and DEFRA and Department of Energy to make sure that we can build these 1.5 million homes that we need. In Milton Keynes in particular, we have seen how house building can create opportunities but we lose public support when the vital public services and infrastructure that are needed don't come alongside those new houses. So can she please tell me how the Cabinet Office is bringing together all these departments so we can achieve our housing mission?
I thank my honourable friend for that question and for highlighting the importance of housing, which is central to what we are doing in government. Each of our 5 national missions are ambitious and will require input and action from a number of different government departments. That's precisely why we're running them as missions and not in the traditional departmental silence. As you would expect, the Cabinet Office is key to supporting this. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, who is Deputy Chair on all mission boards, and myself are playing very active roles in facilitating this cross-government working, supported by a specialist mission delivery unit in the Cabinet Office.
Adam Joe.
6, Mr Speaker.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I would like to answer questions 6 and 19 together. Our first duty as a government is to keep people safe. It is clear we need to act on recent public inquiries that have called for reform, such as the Grenfell Tower tragedy and the COVID-19 pandemic. That is why the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster is leading a review into national resilience against a range of risks the UK faces.
Joe.
Mr Speaker, in the last year alone, we've seen a mini tornado in Nuneaton, flash floods in Maida and rain like no other across Newcastle and Lyme. Now, we see the devastating effects of climate change every day, so can I ask the Minister what she's doing to improve resilience and preparation across central government, local authorities, local communities and emergency services to ensure that Newcastle, Lyme and our country is prepared for any and every extreme weather event?
My honourable friend is right to raise this question. It's a matter of some regret that my right honourable friend, the Environment Secretary, has said before. The previous administration has left our country's flood defences in the worst condition recorded, and it's communities like this that have unfortunately had to pay the price. I can assure him that the Resilience Review will strengthen our approach to resilience across all range of risks we face, including those in his constituency, and we have already taken steps to improve our resilience across the government.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. If we are to ensure that the UK is resilient to the potential threats that face our country, it is vital that those people who work to bring communities together and keep us safe are given the training, knowledge and skills that they need to play their part. My constituency of Stoke-on-Trent South knows the importance of this more than most, with people working tirelessly to tackle racial tension at the centre of calming the violent disorder that we saw over the summer. Organisations such as the Emergency Planning College do fantastic work to deliver crisis management and resilience training. Can the Minister tell the House what steps she is taking to support their work in this area?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. In September, I was delighted to visit the Emergency Planning College, which has served as the UK's Government Centre for Resilience Expertise since its foundation 80 years ago. I'm also pleased to report to the House that the UK Resilience Academy is on track to be established next year in April. It will build on the training currently offered by the Cabinet Office Emergency Planning College to provide a wide range of training for organisations, businesses and individuals. And of course, as part of the Resilience Review, we will consider further whether policy is working well in respect of training and skills and where it needs to be improved.
Shadow Minister John Glenn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I turn to another area of national resilience? National security experts have been warning about the Chinese Communist Party's use of genomics companies to harvest DNA data globally and dominate the genomics industry supply chain. Given the increasing importance of genomics for public health care and the potential dual-use application of this technology, will the Minister confirm if her department is conducting a risk assessment on the data privacy, national security and ethical risks posed by genomic companies linked to systemic competitors?
The honourable member is right to raise this question. We will ban China in terms of their economic engagement and make sure we strengthen our national security.
Sarah Owen.
Question 7, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, with your permission, I will answer question 7 with question 13 and question 17. Last week, the Infected Blood Compensation Authority issued a small number of invitations to begin testing a new claim service. And furthermore, I can announce today that applications for interim payments to the estates of people whose death has not yet been recognised have now opened. This is an important step in getting money into the hands of victims of the infected blood scandal.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My constituent Sharon Moore has been a fierce campaigner for victims and family members of the infected blood scandal after decades of government negligence. Sir Brian Langstaff was clear that community of infected and affected people should be included to enact his inquiry recommendations. However, there had been little to no communication with patients or organisations such as the Haemophilia Society and Terence Higgins Trust by the previous government. I am delighted that the recommendations are being enacted today, but could he please tell us how he will be working with the Department of Health and colleagues in there to make sure that people get the compensation they deserve?
Alan Thompson.
Well, I'd firstly pay tribute to the Honourable Lady's constituent, Sharon Moore, and all her campaigning. As I say, the interim payments to the estates of deceased infected, I've now given the instruction for that to open today. I've already said to this House that I expect the Infected Blood Compensation Authority to make its first payments before the end of the year. Regulations in terms of those who are affected, the second set of regulations, I would hope, subject of course, Mr Speaker, to this House to be completed by the end of March next year, and I expect payments to the affected to begin next year as well.
Adam Thompson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I am very pleased indeed to hear that the Minister has opened applications for the interim payments. Could the Minister elaborate on exactly how those payments might be accessed so that my constituents in Erewash can get their hands on those payments as fast as possible?
In terms of going forward, and I say this to all honourable and right honourable members, please do go on the gov.uk website. There are the details there for the Infected Blood Compensation Authority. I would urge people with interest to register with it. The authority is already sending out newsletters. But I would also say to honourable and right honourable members, on specific cases, they are very welcome to write to me at the Cabinet Office, and I will, of course, look into them and ensure there's a response.
Patrick Hurley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the urgency with which this government has moved this important issue forward, especially now that we know there's a timescale for applications being opened. Can I ask the Minister to update the House on when victims can expect to receive their final compensation payments?
So, Mr Speaker, as I've indicated to the House, I do expect the Infected Blood Compensation Authority to make its first payments before the end of the year, and indeed to start payments to the affected next year. The Government is moving as quickly as it can to ensure that people do receive the compensation that has been, frankly, long overdue.
Shadow Minister John Glenn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I warmly welcome the Right Honourable Gentleman's announcement on the £100,000 interim payments to the estates of deceased infected, thereby maintaining the momentum that was established earlier this year. And I thank him for his thorough statement to the House yesterday introducing the statutory instrument. Could I ask the Right Honourable Gentleman to confirm that it is his intention to ramp up rapidly from the payouts to the cohort of 20 infected in the test case cohort? And can he give us as much detail as he can to the House to advise when others in the infected cohort should expect to receive their payouts?
I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for the constructive tone that he's taken throughout the debates under this government, and it continues the work that we did when I was the shadow and we worked together to try to deliver these payments as quickly as possible. The whole purpose of having that test cohort is to enable a range of different cases to be considered by the Infected Blood Compensation Authority and to give the best possible opportunity to ramp up as quickly as possible. That is why I do expect the first payments to be made before the end of this year. I then expect the payments to the affected to begin next year, and I will be ensuring that regulations are placed before this House to make sure that those deadlines are reached.
Dr Danny James.
Number 8, Mr Speaker.
The behaviour of Conservative ministers in their 14 years in power shattered trust in politics, partying in Downing Street whilst the whole country sacrificed their freedom, handing lucrative COVID contracts to friends and donors, failing to expel MPs caught breaking the rules. This new government is determined to restore trust in politics. The Prime Minister has made clear that he expects the highest standards from those who have the privilege of serving in his government. The Prime Minister will soon be issuing an updated ministerial code. Alongside this, we are taking a range of other measures to restore confidence in government as a force for good.
Dr Danny James.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As a veterinary surgeon, I'm expected to maintain the highest professional and behavioural standards at all times, along with many other regulated professions like doctors and teachers. And if I do fail to meet those standards, I face the very real prospect of being struck off. Given the behaviour of previous ministers and even a Prime Minister, would the Minister agree with me that if we would enshrine the ministerial code in law, it would restore trust in politics and ensure that people who lie and break the rules will be facing very real consequences?
Yes. I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. As the Leader of the House has said, this new Parliament offers a chance to turn the page after the sorry and sordid record of the last, and we're determined to take this opportunity. That is why we will be issuing a new and robust ministerial code. As we promised in our manifesto, the House has established a modernisation committee as well. It will be tasked with driving up standards and addressing the culture of this House. This sits alongside the work that the Cabinet Office is doing to improve standards and confidence in politics.
Will Foster. Sorry, John Platt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On these benches, we support the new government's aspirations for the highest ministerial standards and acknowledge the significant experience that the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff can bring to her role as envoy to the nations and regions. So why then, in breach of Cabinet Office guidance, have ministers not published a word on her terms of reference, her new salary, or her SPAD severance payment, or is she correct in her understanding that she's top of the list of new peers?
Anything in relation to the former Chief of Staff will be announced in due course. It's not right for me to comment on the terms and conditions of any individual.
Mr Will Foster.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question 10.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With permission, I'd like to answer questions 10 and 11 together. This government was elected to deliver for people throughout the United Kingdom, and whatever political differences we have in different parts of the United Kingdom, the public expects us to work together for the common good. That's why we held the Council of Nations and Regions recently in Edinburgh, focused on investment and good jobs across the country.
Will Foster.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm sure we all agree that it's local communities that knows what's best for their own affairs. Will the Minister agree with me to formalise the Council of Ministers so that the governments of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, along with regional leaders in England, can meet regularly to shape their communities? Good question.
Thank you. Well, the idea is that the Council of Nations and Regions, which met in Edinburgh the other week, will meet twice a year. I believe that these relationships are about more than formal meetings, though, and it's important underneath the formalities to establish as good and as normal a working relationship as we possibly can.
Graham Nolan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This new Labour government has already outlined it's going to invest in sectors vital to the economy of Dunfermline and Dollar, including renewables, defence and engineering. That investment can only fully deliver if there is alignment with the Scottish Government to deliver the pipeline of skills needed for local people to fill those jobs, an agenda the SNP has singularly failed to address in 17 years in power. Can the Minister outline how he will ensure this Labour Government will coordinate and press the SNP to ensure this opportunity of this investment is fully realised?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My honourable friend is absolutely right to stress investment, and investment was the theme of the first meeting. It was also the theme of the investment summit held last week, and through that we were able to announce over £60 billion of inward investment to the United Kingdom. This will benefit people in all parts of the country, and he's absolutely right to say that to make the most of it, we need to give people the skills to do the jobs that this investment will bring.
Abdusam Mohammed.
Number 12, Mr Speaker.
As set out in our manifesto, this government is committed to reforming the House of Lords. Our objective is to bring about a renewed focus on active contribution within a smaller House of Lords that better reflects the country it serves. As an immediate first step in reform, the government has introduced legislation within its first 100 days to remove the right of hereditary peers to sit and vote in the House of Lords.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's extremely welcomed the fact that this House overwhelmingly supported the hereditary removal of the House of Lords hereditary, supported the House of Lords hereditary peers bill. The Lords must be more reflective of society, and as it stands, it currently isn't, and it's not reflective of regions like South Yorkshire or Sheffield. Does the Minister agree with me that there should not be places in our Parliament reserved purely for those from certain families, as it only preserves the privilege of the aristocracy?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I think it was astonishing that the Conservative Party decided that there are few things it seems they currently stand for, but one of them is hereditary privilege in the House of Lords.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Olney.
Very much, Mr Speaker. Last week's legislation was welcomed and supported by the Liberal Democrats, and we were glad of the government's suggestion that these were initial steps ahead of broader reform. I ask if the Minister will outline a timeframe for when further legislation will be brought forward for democratic reform of our upper chamber, and can he assure me that safeguards will be put in place to protect against cronyism with an improved mechanisms to review appointments to the other house?
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for the constructive approach that she's taken to this matter. Clearly, we will want to see the current bill on the statute book as soon as possible. We will also then move on to the second stage of our reform, looking carefully to build a consensus to have that smaller, better value, active House of Lords that we all want to see, providing that more considered scrutiny of this House. With regard to her specific points about the appointments process, that is certainly something we will consider as well.
Edward Morello.
Number 18, please, Mr Speaker.
In the aftermath of the flooding experience at the end of September, and as the final figure of flooded properties is confirmed, discussions are ongoing between MHCLG and DBT about the activation of the flood recovery framework. This framework is a core package of business and community recovery support. There are stringent criteria for activation of the scheme by ministers, and as the current estimates are that localised impacts and relatively low number of properties flooded in September are below the threshold for the activation of the scheme. However, the Flood Reinsurance Scheme, a joint initiative between the UK Government and insurance industry, is currently available to a wide range of eligible households in flood risk areas.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Climate change means that West Dorset faces a growing flood risk. With increasing frequency, heavy rainfall is flooding fields, making roads unpassable and turning villages like Stratton and Maida Nuneaton into islands. Last year, 700 properties in my hometown of Bridport, including a school and a vital healthcare centre, were put at risk due to flooding. What steps is this government taking to ensure that the necessary funding and resources are available to flood prevention and emergency response in rural constituencies like West Dorset, where large geographical areas can create additional challenges?
DEFRA, as the lead department for flooding in England, is standing up to their emergency operations centre when a flood forecast or flooding impacts justifies it. This includes when flooding may exceed the capacity of local response networks to manage. The EOS works in tandem with government. I also want to mention, as a rage, we've also set up the Flood Task Force, which is also looking at how we can deal with flooding in the future to also make sure that we can address issues like his constituency.
We come to Topicals. Sonia Kumar.
Question 1, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As we've heard last week, we had the second reading of the Hereditary Peers Bill to modernise the Lords. We've also delivered on our manifesto commitment to hold the first Council of Nations and Regions. We are working hard to deliver justice for the victims of the infected blood scandal. I've published a written statement today on the implementation of the UK Biological Security Strategy. And finally, Mr Speaker, we have set out the position on the right balance of flexible working and time in the office for civil servants.
Sonia Kumar.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What plans does the Cabinet Office have to support SMEs in building resilience to future economic shocks and crises, ensuring that they can continue to operate under difficult conditions?
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend. Small businesses are the lifeblood of our economy, and our agenda for growth will help small businesses, and we are determined to support them. I can assure my honourable friend that they are an important part of our resilience strategy and our resilience review. And just earlier this week, my honourable friend, the Parliamentary Under-Secretary, met with a range of businesses to discuss shared goals to resilience and make sure that they can have an input into the strategy that we are preparing.
Shadow Secretary Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster provide an update on the current situation for British nationals in Lebanon, including what measures are being taken to ensure their safety and any plans for further evacuation given the ongoing instability in that region?
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster for his question. This is a very serious situation in Lebanon. There are several thousand UK nationals in Lebanon. The Foreign Office advice for some time has been simple: leave now. The government has chartered several flights to help UK nationals leave. We are also running a Register Your Presence site to make sure that we can track anyone who's in country to get the best possible communications with them. And we do have preparations for other evacuation measures should they be necessary for the protection of our citizens in Lebanon.
Oliver Dowden.
Well, I thank the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster for that answer, and may I echo from these benches that the correct approach for British nationals should be to leave now rather than to rely on the government to take further steps in respect of them. However, in the event that the situation deteriorates further, what contingency plans does the government have in place to ensure the swift and safe evacuation of British nationals, particularly in high-risk areas?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This is a situation that we have been monitoring closely for some months, and I can assure the Right Honourable Gentleman and the whole House that the Foreign Office, the Ministry of Defence and all parts of government are putting in place the necessary measures should the situation on the ground change to a point where we judge that more needs to be done to get people out of the country.
In Lavery.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Minister will be well aware that there's thousands of low-paid workers being exploited on outsourced contracts in government buildings such as cleaners, security guards, people in the catering. Can the Minister update the House on what progress is actually being made to insource these jobs? Because after all, they're very critical to the efficient operation of Parliament.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question. Whether workers are working insourced or outsourced, we always want them to have a good deal and a fair deal at work, and that is why the government brought forward this week a powerful bill to improve employment rights for people right across the board, because we believe that when people go to work, they deserve fair pay and decent conditions at work.
Luke Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Figures from London councils show that 3 in 10 of Londoners who were turned away from polling stations due to lack of appropriate voter ID did not return to vote. Can I ask the Minister what assessment has been made on overall turnout by the voter ID laws implemented by the last government, particularly when it is understood that these measures disproportionately affect already disenfranchised communities like those renting from a social landlord, the unemployed, lower social grades, disabled people and young people?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's very important that this voter ID system does not prevent people who've got a legitimate right to vote from exercising their democratic rights. So we are keeping this under review and already making a change, for example, to make it easier for veterans to get the ID necessary to vote.
Emma Lulbeck.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I please ask my right honourable friend if the duty of candour in the Hillsborough law will apply to the 70-year-long nuclear test veterans scandal?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. I know she's been a long-standing champion for justice, for victims of the infected blood scandal, and indeed the nuclear test veterans that she's mentioned. We are looking to introduce a very broad duty of candour, a general duty of candour. I should also point out that criminal sanctions are going to be really important to punish the most egregious breaches, and I'm pleased to confirm to the House today, as the Prime Minister announced in September, that the bill we will bring forward will include criminal sanctions.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, but I withdraw my question.
In which case, I will go to Gareth Snell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister will be aware that the dire financial inheritance bequeathed by the last government means there is rightly a renewed focus on how we spend public money. So could the Minister tell the House what work he's doing across government to ensure better use of public money, drive down waste, improve efficiency, in particular regards to consultants?
Minister.
Thank the honourable friend for their question. As the Minister responsible for public service reform, I'm clear that every single pound saved on unnecessary consultancy spend is a pound invested in the renewal of our public services and delivering our ambitious missions to change the country. We're taking tough action to cut down on wasteful consultancy spend. We're acting to stop all non-essential government consultancy spending this year, halve government spending on consultancy in future years, with a target saving of £550 million in 2024 to 25 and £680 million in 25 to 26.
Brendan O'Hara.
Mr. Speaker, as you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, the people of Scotland are beside themselves with excitement. In fact, it goes to be a fair giddy at the prospect of receiving a visit from this Prime Minister's special envoy. But as we prepare the red carpet and the mass pipe bands to welcome her, can I ask exactly what was his department's role in the creation of this post? When will we see a published job description, and when will she finally take up this post officially?
Thank you. I'm very grateful to the honourable member for his question. I thought he'd be joining me today in satisfaction at a 0-0 draw away from home last night. As for the personnel matter that he raised, all I would say to the House is I'm enormously grateful to the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff for her efforts as Chief of Staff. I do believe that we want good, normal working relationships with the Scottish Government, and anything to do with the post will be announced in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite representations from me and several members of Maida Parish Council requesting action to tackle repeated flood incidents at Bar Hill and particularly Mallow Close, families and businesses in Newcastle and Lyme are still being let down by the Conservative-run Staffordshire County Council. So will the Minister meet with me to discuss the resilience review so we can deliver where others have failed?
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for that question. As I mentioned before, the Resilience Review will strengthen our approach to resilience across a range of risks we face, including flooding. And as I've mentioned, we've already taken important measures through the creation of the dedicated Flood Resilience Task Force, which I attended the first meeting last month.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The provision of blue light escorts is clearly a matter of operational policing. But last week, my colleagues on the London Assembly wrote to the Right Honourable Gentleman asking for an inquiry into the provision of tickets to politicians, including the Labour Mayor of London, and the pressure that was then applied to the Metropolitan Police to provide an escort to Taylor Swift. So could he actually have that inquiry, that review, so we can see what happened and make sure that if mistakes were made, then actually they can be rectified and it doesn't happen again?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These are operational decisions for the police, but I have to tell him I am glad that the person who is currently the biggest global pop star in the world was able to play in London, particularly following the threat of a terrorist attack to her previous concerts in Austria. I am glad that the show went on.
Thompson. Swifty, you know. Adam Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was fantastic to see senior officials from the UK's closest allies in intelligence meet recently to coordinate the fight against fraud, which affects the most vulnerable members of my community in Erewash. Can the Minister share steps the Government is taking to support the Public Sector Fraud Authority to prevent, detect and recover fraud and error?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. At the Five Eyes Summit last month, I reiterated this government's firm commitment to tackling fraud and to learning from our closest intelligence allies. Fraud does not respect international boundaries. This is a top priority for this government, and we're taking action to build a wide anti-fraud coalition on advanced AI and analytics and to take further action on enforcement.
Tessamon.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you'll be aware that we're coming to the end of Whistleblowing Awareness Week. Civil servants and others are ministers' best friends. They're the people who can indicate where to find evidence of fraud and corruption and other criminal activity. Could I press ministers to create the Office of the Whistleblower to give new legal protections, normalise speaking out, and promote greater public awareness of the whistleblowing rights, demonstrating the importance of whistleblowers in a fair and open and transparent society?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her question. She is absolutely right to draw attention to two things: the good work that civil servants do and the valuable role that whistleblowers play. That's why the last time we were in government we legislated for legal protection for whistleblowers, and it's really important that people can come forward without fear of what it is that they have to reveal.
To Becky Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The United Nations calculates the Human Development Index, which ranks countries based on GDP per capita, but also includes health and education measures, such as life expectancy and school enrolment. As an integral part of our mission-led government, could the Minister please outline the steps they are taking across departments to ensure health indicators can be considered alongside economic indicators as a measure of sustainable growth for our country?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and we've seen record numbers of our fellow citizens, 2.8 million, excluded from the workforce due to long-term sickness. This government recognises that taking action to improve health outcomes and address economic activity is vital for achieving sustainable economic growth. We'll produce a white paper to get Britain working. This will support other steps we are taking across government, creating more good jobs in clean energy through our modern industrial strategy, making work pay and improving the quality of work through our New Deal for working people. We're also committed to cutting NHS waiting times, improving mental health support so that we can tackle the root causes of inactivity and fix the foundations.
The Minister gave a very helpful reply to a question on the blood compensation. So can I ask a question? What discussions has the Minister had with victims and families of the infected blood scandal in Northern Ireland since the final report was published in August of this year? Thank you so much.
Can I just say to the honourable gentleman, I'm grateful for his interest in this matter and his words of support in terms of the progress the government has been making. Sir Robert Francis conducted a very extensive engagement exercise during the period of the general election. The government responded to that by adopting 69 of the 74 recommendations that were subsequently made. I myself have met victims of the scandal in the days before I made the announcement back in August. I also work very closely with the health ministers of the devolved administrations, including Northern Ireland.
Jane Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister confirm that the procurement reforms will consider social value and local impact in contracts of government and partners like the Crown Estate and GB Energy in important areas where there are WTO non-competition exemptions, for example, floating offshore wind contracts in the Celtic Sea? They could provide a critical boost to the economies of places like Cornwall.
I thank my honourable friend for their question. I can absolutely confirm that we will do everything we can to ensure that the new national policy procurement statement drives social value around communities in the UK in line with our trade obligations.
Debbie Abrahams.
Speaker. I welcome the publication of the Child Poverty Task Force framework from yesterday. Is the Minister able to say more about the delivery of the actual strategy other than spring? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. This shows the importance of this to the government. The last time that we were in office, we reduced child poverty. This is an issue dear to our hearts. That's why the strategy is coming forward. That's why ministers are working hard on this. And we've been clear since we took office that while we want economic growth throughout the country, we also want the benefits of that to be felt by people in every part of the country and people of every income group.
Amanda Martin. Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to be part of a mission-led government, but mission-led government isn't about just about emissions, but it's about how the government does it. Does the Minister agree with me that this should be data-driven?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. She's absolutely right. And here, Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of the exchanges of this week, I want to pay tribute to something that the previous government did, which was to improve the data operation at the heart of government. This does help when government is forming policy. We want to build on that, use data. It's important that we modernise how government works, and the accurate use of data can help us make better policy, and that's what we want to do.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Almost 29,000 families in Scotland benefited from maternity pay last year, worth over £200 million. Does the Minister share my concern of suggestions coming from the Conservative Party leadership candidate that this should be reduced in this country?
Mr. Speaker, I very much share my honourable friend's concerns. In fact, the only economic policy we've had so far from the Conservative leadership contest has been the suggestion that we reduce maternity pay. This will do nothing for families, nothing for mothers and children, and nothing for the good operation of our economy, and I hope they think twice about this suggestion.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Speaker. Ahead of any budget, there's always talk about tough decisions. But could the Minister remind us why it is that we are in this difficult position in the first place? And could he please update us on how the progress is going on clawing back the COVID fraud, where we saw taxpayers' money being handed over to former ministers' mates?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend is absolutely right. We knew we would inherit a difficult decision, but it was much more difficult than we thought when we came into office, and anybody who objects to difficult decisions announced in the budget next week should know where the responsibility for those lie, and it is squarely on the shoulders of the party opposite, and it falls to us to clean up the mess that we have inherited from them, and that you will hear more about when the Chancellor gets to her feet next week.
Graham Downing.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Over the last few years, we've seen an increase in attacks by foreign governments on UK cyber security. Can the Minister please update us on what steps his department are taking to make sure that our public services across the UK are fully protected from these attacks?
Mr Speaker, this is vital work for government. We have a combination of legacy systems with vulnerabilities and, of course, constant investment in new systems to make sure that our public services can work in the most modern way. It's really important that we guard against either foreign state interference or other malign actors who would try to disable institutions and disable public services through cyber attacks. That is an important part of resilience and an important part of protecting these services for the public good.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can my right honourable friend tell me what steps he's taking to keep Scotland at the heart of the Union and keep Ayrshire's economy growing?
Mr Speaker, I believe that people in Scotland have tired of the politics of grievance and division. And they expect governments, whatever their political colour, to work together to promote economic growth, to get inward investment in, to get good jobs for people and to have good public services. And wouldn't that be a refreshing contrast to some of the division that we've had in recent years?
That completes questions. I'll let the front benches change over.